Hi, I'm Pastor John from New Life Assembly, and we're continuing our daily devotional series in the Song of Solomon. Today we're looking at Song of Solomon chapter 5 verse 10 through chapter 6 verse 3. And we're going to talk about how the woman's passion is being rekindled for her husband. Remember yesterday that she was apathetic toward him, and it caused her to miss an opportunity of intimacy with him when he was longing for intimacy with her. And she went out in the streets and looked for him but couldn't find him, and ended up getting beat up and taken by the guards back to her place, and probably thought of as a prostitute for being out late at night. And so we ended yesterday by talking about how she then elicits the help of the women of Jerusalem, the daughters of Jerusalem, to find her spouse. And so today let's take a look at Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verses 10 through chapter 6, verse 3. The woman is speaking here. My beloved is radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water, bathed in milk, sitting beside a full pool. His cheeks are like beds of spices, mounds of sweet-smelling herbs. His lips are lilies, dripping liquid myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with jewels. His body is polished ivory, bedecked with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set on bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. The others then respond in the beginning of chapter 6. Where has your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where has your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you? The woman then responds in verse 2. My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to graze in the gardens, and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies. As we look at this section today, it is sort of the conclusion to yesterday's video about how she has been apathetic in her love, and it has cost her this precious moment of intimacy with her beloved husband, and how he left before she could get the door open because he wasn't going to force himself upon her. He wasn't going to make her love him, as so many men today attempt to do, and it does not work. You can't make somebody love you. Force by its very nature precludes the idea of love. And so we look at this woman who has been reinvigorated with a passion for her spouse, even though he's not there. And the transition into today's message of hope and rekindling the passion is based upon the question of the ladies of Jerusalem, the women of Jerusalem, the daughters of Jerusalem, as they ask her, well, what's he look like? How can we help you find him? How's he different from any other guy that's out there? And so she is just gushing with love. And she does the same thing to Solomon that he did to her in chapter 4 on their wedding night. She begins to talk about him from the head down and begins to enumerate the reasons that she loves him. And so as we look at her poetic way of talking about how precious he is to her, she does exactly that, actually. She uses these images of very fine and very expensive items. Gold, alabaster, spices, the list goes on. Sapphires, the cedars of Lebanon. And just so many of these are priceless materials in Jerusalem. The cedars of Lebanon, for example, are the choicest of all wood in the area around Israel. And in fact, they're usually imported from Lebanon to Israel because Israel does not naturally have beautiful cedars at all. they're not there in the land. Israel is built in a sort of desert-like Mediterranean climate. So to have cedars, you have to go north. You have to go to Lebanon to get them. And all of these spices are not something that every household owns like today. Today whenever I make some food or something and I throw in those spices, I can get those at the store for quite cheaply. But it wasn't so for them. Spices were an import. Many of these things, gold, all of these are imports. Although they did have a lot of gold in Solomon's time. And so we look at this and we see the way that she responds to her husband and responds to his look and who he is. And she starts at the head, she goes down the whole way to his feet. And she uses these priceless items to explain how priceless he is to her. And so I've said it to the men, and now I'm going to say it to the women in marriage. I told the men in chapter 4 that they need to be telling their spouse constantly about how beautiful and how precious she is to them. So I'm going to reverse the tables now and talk to the ladies and tell you, ladies, your guys may not sound like they need to hear that you love them, that they're priceless to you, but let me tell you something. It goes just as long of a way whenever you tell your husband how great he is and how wonderful he is, just as much as whenever he tells you how he feels about you. I think it's very important for both of the spouses in a marriage to remember that every human being needs to know that they're wanted, that they're desired, that they are someone who can benefit another person. We all need that. And what better place than in a marriage to build a relationship based on mutual affection and reminding one another how great you really are as people and then together as a couple. So many marriages go the other way with this. They are abusive toward one another, abusive language and inappropriate responses to one another and such and so forth. But how could you build something great in your spouse? Something great in your marriage? And how could you let them know, hey, I chose to marry you. I see greatness in you. I see wonderful and beautiful things in you. And everybody needs to hear that, whether it's the man or the woman. And so here, as the woman's passion is reignited, she is reminding herself even of the good qualities of Solomon. And I'll tell you what, ladies, whenever you're mad at your husband, because he did this or he did that, or he said this or he said that, or he didn't think about this or that, take a moment and think of some of the reasons that you married him. Despite whatever you may say now, you married that man for a reason. There are at least some qualities that you liked, otherwise you wouldn't have married the guy. So think about those things a little bit. Write those down. Remind yourself of those. And then maybe that will give you an open door to lovingly and graciously prod him in an area in which he does need a little bit of work. And so this is what Shulamith is doing. She's telling about how different Solomon is from all of the other men in Israel. And he is quite a catch as far as she's concerned. Now the other women respond now and they say, where has your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where has your beloved turned that we may seek him with you? Alright, so now these ladies are like, hey, that sounds like a pretty nice guy. We want to talk to him too. And I believe that this is not meant as a catty sort of let's take your spouse from you kind of approach, as much as it's a confirmation that Solomon is worthy of Shulamith, that he is a great man, despite the fact that he has gone off to his garden and has left her in the night because she told him she didn't want him to be there. And so I don't think this is one of those places where she needs to get jealous of the other women or anything like that. I think this is one of those places where the other women go, that guy sounds great. You should keep a hold of him. And I'll tell you what, in your marriage, whenever you hear other people talking about how wonderful your spouse is, look, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly with your spouse. But that does not mean that other people are wrong in their assessment of your spouse. And sometimes you need that reminder from other people. You need to be reminded of that character. And that brings up a very good point in the Song of Solomon that's very important for us to know in our sexually charged culture of today. In the Song of Solomon, rekindling passion has nothing to do with sex. Not one thing. And it has very little to do with how a person looks or smells or is presented, although those things are very important to a marriage as well. You know how they rekindle their romance in the Song of Solomon? They do it through thinking about one another's character. They are so much more impassioned by the fact of who they are to one another and who they are as people than anything else. And sex is just a byproduct of their happiness and of their longing for each other in ethical and moral and godly character. Character must be one of the foundations of your marriage. Attraction's important, but it's not the whole kit and caboodle. You need to know that your spouse is a good and godly person, and that will be enough to ignite your passion, as the Song of Solomon shows. The woman knows where her husband is. She tells us where he is. He's in his gardens. He's among the lilies. He's looking at things. He's checking things out. So it's probably daytime by now, and she's probably about to go out to the garden and talk to her spouse and finally have their moment that they were supposed to have last night if both of them had not reacted the way that they did to one another. And so now it's time for the makeup as we look at tomorrow's video. I want to encourage you today in your marriage to take the time to realize what is really good about your spouse, to write those things down, to remember those things, to allow those things to make your passion swell for that person. Because in the bad times, it's easy to notice the bad things. It takes work to remember the good things and to think on those things rather than on the things that you're seeing in front of you. And in those times, your passion can be rekindled for your spouse. I hope this helps you today. Have a blessed day.